Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. It's a well known saying, and that is why we need to understand the events that led up to the courthouse being taken out of our community back in 2015 by the Liberal government. Instead of me just listing off all the consequences that were a result of that, the negative consequence on accused, on victims, and the ripple effects from that, I want to stitch together for you the story for today's Daily Live for 5 of what was going on, the protest, the people with vision in our community, David Bartlett, Joel Hansen, the Charlotte County Barristers Society, who went to bat, who stood up, and the Liberal MLA as well, against the Liberal government taking the courthouse out of our community. And so once we're done this 5 minutes, you will see what we lost. First, as I mentioned yesterday, what we had. So it's up on the screen here from an article by Canadian Lawyer. Offices for judges, youth court services, a law library, probation, and victim services. Imagine that in our own community. The Department of Mental Health. Imagine that in our community. Okay, that was all here. And then it was announced. I'm going to go to the next slide here. In the speech from the throne in the legislature on March 31st, a budget speech, the finance minister, Roger Melanson, said, with the opening of the St. John Law Courts in 2013, so in 2013, St. John got its own law courts, we now have a number of facilities that are no longer critical to the proper functioning of our justice system. So isn't that interesting, that way of looking at it? The functioning of the justice system did not need the courthouses in Charlotte County, the one on Grand Manan and the one in St. Stephen. That was how the minister looked at the courts. And I wonder if that I could go down a rabbit hole here, and I might, because we're on here every day. I wonder if that is at the root of the problem of why our services are disappearing. Did you see this, the phrasing there, this sense that in order for the system to function, we do not need these kind of local satellite inconveniences that might cost us money. Again, the spin out effect would definitely contradict that. And so as we start putting together what happened after that speech was made in March, here's the way the rest of the story went. We had locally, Charlotte County lawyer Joel Hansen said the courthouse closures, so the announcement was made in March, you should know this. They were scheduled to close on October 1st, so there were some months in between. And Joel Hansen said the courthouse closures will have a drastic impact on those going through the court system. We're not sure how they're getting this idea that they're saving money by moving everything to St. John. So I said yesterday, and I'll say it again today, a lot of these things, friends that I talked to that have voted conservative in the past, and in this case, it was a Liberal government, have said, well, you know, they're fiscally conservative. They don't tax and spend. They are more responsible with the public purse. And in this case, the decision to remove the courthouses, you'll see in future, but I guess I'm going to spill the beans now, essentially saved $60,000 a year, but the cost of driving people, the RCMP, I mentioned yesterday the quote where the gentleman was quoted as saying, the RCMP will be the most expensive drivers on the planet. The RCMP now taking their time to drive people, simply drive people with all their training and all the patrols we need. They simply drive people. That cost about $100,000 a year. And again, being pulled off patrols, etc., as opposed to the $60,000 a year that was supposedly saved by removing the courts. Okay, so Joel Hansen continuing, that's a drastic step, he said. Somebody from St. Stephen who lives 20 minutes north from St. Stephen, there's no public transit down here. Hey, that's still true all these years later, 8 years later, no public transit. That is something that I'm tackling in terms of public safety. We will move into that in our next part, okay? Part 4 of public safety is public transit. None, really. It's a mysterious decision in terms of what's behind it, Joel Hansen said. Hansen says some form of court-related public transit will be needed for the merger to work. Was that done? No, it has not been done. As we say, we have the police who have essentially become the public transit system. And then he said, many people who appear in court, yes, that is a typo directly from the screen grab that I grabbed it from in the CBC News article. Many people who appear in court have mental health issues and have no cars. How do you get someone with a mental health issue to drive more than 100 kilometers away and they have no car? So that is where we are at in the story in terms of folks like Joel Hansen saying this affects people with no cars. This affects people with mental health issues. There will need to be some sort of public transit. And you would think, again, I guess if you're pulling a courthouse out, you're not thinking you're going to supplement the savings with public transit. And of course, that didn't happen. And we will talk about that tomorrow. So that is it for the Live for 5 today. I know you're probably on the edge of your seats because that was just the announcement was made in March in the budget speech. And then this is a month later. Joel Hansen was mentioning this. We'll get to what the Charlotte County Barristers Society did and their appeal. And again, move forward with the consequences we feel right now so acutely in 2024. And that's one of the reasons why I'm running. Those were predicted. Those were forecast in 2015. And that is the case with so many things I've talked about. The housing issue, nursing homes. We've seen an aging population. We have seen how the government has not invested in a single public housing unit or community housing unit in 40 years in this province. I thought that was a mistake when I read it. How can the government not have built a single new public housing unit in 40 years? So this is the kind of ignoring that the Green Party constantly and consistently stands up and rings the bell on. I know you want somebody in the legislature. We have 3 Green MLAs already who are quoted frequently. And of course, they are on committees and they are on shadow cabinets holding the government to account. We need more MLAs. I hope to not only be that for you in Fredericton, but of course, an advocate for Saint Croix in our riding where we live, that we get these services restored, because it was not unknown that these consequences would occur. I'll see you tomorrow. Hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you in part